Hamptonio. To manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. And to manipulate consciousness is to manipulate possibilities. And to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. Welcome to the show. Got a great show for you today. We just want to remind you guys of some of the Juneteenth events that are coming up June 29th. If you want to be a part of the parade, if you want to be a vendor, or you just want to attend, you can give me a call, 216-323-6155, 323-6155. It's going to be a great event. I'm going to call it the real Juneteenth affair. We know we got some perpetrators out there, though. We want you guys to come on down and participate with us. We're going to have Carlos Jones as our headliner, so make sure you be a part of that. It's a little sunny out here in Cleveland, but a little windy, so it can kind of confuse you a little bit. But hey, this is Cleveland. In the remote studio, we got our main man, Brother Vince. What's going on with you?
Well, we had a great concert last night with Richard Bona at the Maltz Performing Arts Center, and was an extension of our conversation last week. Really enthused to know that the brother is tuned in to what's going on the continent of Africa. And again, great conversation last week and great conversation last night. And if you missed him last night, you can see him for free at Oberlin College tonight. So if you didn't get there last night, you got another chance. Also, just want to remind everyone that the Jazz Poets will be performing at Rudy's Pub this evening, or I'm sorry, tomorrow evening at 6 p.m., 6 to 9. It's also a free event. Really excited now to have our guest with us. He is a distinguished Afrocentric scholar. As a matter of fact, many of you may know him as the person who coined the phrase Afrocentricity. His biography is extremely long. He's been with us for a minute, but I'm just going to give you a few highlights. He is a professor extraordinarius at the University of South Africa and professor in the Department of Africology at Temple University in Philadelphia. He has been named one of the 100 leading thinkers in America, and he is the author of more than 100 books translated into dozens of languages. Dr. Asante has published more than 500 articles and has been recognized as one of the 10 most widely cited African scholars. That's quite a resume, and we are pleased to welcome him to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Welcome, Dr. Molefi K. Asante.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be on 360 Info Network, and it's my pleasure to be again here with Brother Vince and Brother Lynn Hamilton. I'm so happy. It's been a minute since I've been on this program, so now I'm just really happy to be back with you. Thank you so much.
Right. Appreciate you, Doc, as always. I have to say this, like, every time I call you, it just seems like I'm calling up a friend.
Oh, right.
and he answers the phone. Hey, Lynn, what's going on?
Yes.
And a man of your stature to have that type of relationship with it, people just don't know how wonderful that is. Because we appreciate you, brother, and your work. Your long lasting efforts to put Black folks on the map.
Yes.
And you coined that phrase Afrocentricity. You know what I mean? And that has taken off. It's just a common word at this particular point that we use to describe Black folks. But Dr. Asante, a lot of stuff is going on in the planet, and I can't express the urgency that we need to be tuned in. Right now, folks is into the NBA with the playoffs but there's some historical things going on over in the continent. We talked a little bit about it with Brother Sekou and the new regime change. But then, again, we got some political jockeying and craziness going over here in this country as well. So, Doc, what is your take on where we at and where we should be focused? Because I need some backup, Doc.
Well, let me just say this, that I've come to believe that, and it's lately, actually, that history is not linear. It is not. It doesn't move in a straight line. I mean, it actually, there are cycles, and in fact, one of the early writers on African history, Ibn Khaldun, made such a statement in the 14th, 15th century, that history was cycles. And I think that right now, what I'm looking at in terms of the African population in the world is that we're going through another cycle. And in fact, it doesn't mean that we have not moved beyond where we were the last cycle. It just means that things seem to repeat themselves in generations, that there are some generations that are forgotten. For example, what I consider my generation, that is the generation of my activism as a young person, which was in the 60s, that generation, we thought that we had solved all the problems. At least we were solving all the problems, and there would be no problems to be solved. And we felt across the world that with Biko in South Africa, and Nascimento in Brazil, and African people all over, that the 60s and the 70s, that the time would come when there would be a sort of liberation of our minds and a liberation of our culture. And we would be free, and people who would depend on cultural grounding. But we saw that there was a letdown in that. We were still making changes, but in making those changes, what we saw was that the empire itself was striking back at the progress that we have made. And so now, with the awakening, I call it, in West Africa, among the young people in West Africa, and West Africa, by the way, has the youngest population in the world. The average age of the people in West Africa is about 17. That's compared to the average age of people in Europe and America to be 49. So it's a young population in Africa, and they are now seeing the possibilities of change for the good. And to see the young politicians, including young brother Jume Faye, whose father I know, to see him rise to be president of Senegal is a wonderful thing, because that says to me that this young man has at least Pan-African leanings, because his father has Pan-African leanings and has been in the Pan-African struggle for a long time. And to see the work that's being done in Niger, I mean, I just heard, well, a couple of days ago, that the American government has decided that they would take the advice of the leaders of Niger and leave the country, because Niger has said, look, we don't need American bases in Niger. But the United States has had that base in Niger for several years now. And that base in Niger is the biggest drone operating base in that region of the world. And it operates America's drones. But Niger has says, no, you got to get out of our country. There are 1,000 American troops in Niger. Most people don't even know that. I mean, most people cannot even tell you. Most Americans cannot even tell you where Niger is on the map. Yet there is one of the most significant American military bases is in Niger. But Niger has kicked out the French, who had been their colonial masters, and now they're asking. And then the Americans went in. And now they're asking the American government to leave their country, because what they feel is that what the European and the American powers intend to do is to reinstitute a colonial situation in which the Europeans who are in those African countries are basically living a good life while the masses of the people are suffering. So that's one of the reasons they say, look, you know what? There's no reason for us to have a United States military base in our country. So they have now, and America just admitted, Blinken just said, Secretary of State Blinken just said that they would remove the American troops from Niger. Now, in Burkina Faso, the same problem. In Burkina Faso, they've been fighting, for example, the Islamic forces from the north. And this is a very strange situation because the country, Burkina Faso, is predominantly Muslim, but yet the people from the north who see themselves as better than the African people from the south are fighting against them to split the country. And they are, many of them are remnants of the Libyan fighters during the period of Gaddafi. So they are fighting, and Burkina Faso is fighting against them. Mali is doing the same thing. Mali has had the same problem. The people of Mali, of course, are having to fight against the many of these people they call the Tuaregs, but they're actually people who have come many times from Algeria and from Libya, trying to introduce a new form of strict disciplinary Islam, and they have attacked even the shrines of many of the ancestral shrines in Burkina Faso and in Mali. So this is actually a cultural war as well as a political war that's going on in West Africa. And the African culture is standing against the Arab culture, basically, which has decided to come in and to change the nature of the cultures that are living in Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Senegal. Senegal has avoided most of that at this time because, of course, on Senegal's northern border, you have the country of Mauritania. And Mauritania is itself witnessing internal fights because the Arabs in Mauritania have still maintained a sort of slave system inside Mauritania, where the indigenous African people have often been seen as slaves. So that's a big problem, and I've written on this. I've spoken on it at conferences. I've talked to many Mauritanians about it. Mauritania and Sudan, two of the countries where you have these black populations that are basically really enslaved to the Arab populations. And the Arab populations are not necessarily the majority. In the case of Sudan, you got 15% of the people would classify themselves as Arabs, the others as Africans. But the 15% are the people who control the economy. And of course, they're fighting among themselves now. You got two Arab factions in Sudan fighting, and they've displaced about 10 million people. Most people don't hear about it because we concentrated in terms of our media mainly on Israel and Gaza. And the situation in Sudan is just as bad or worse than the situation in Gaza in terms of the destruction of the people of Darfur, the destruction of the people in the Blue Nile region, the killing of the people in the Nuba Mountains. All these different regions of Sudan are being attacked by these Muslim armies. And the crazy thing is that the black people, many of them are Muslims, but it's not so it's not even a religious battle in many senses. It is a cultural battle. The Arabs, they're not saying we're attacking you because we don't like your religion. We're attacking you because you have not decided that you want to speak only Arabic. You want to speak your own African language. You want to recognize your mother, your grandmother, and your grandfather.
Yes, that's true.
And that's a problem. And we have to get rid of that culture. You want to
Mm.
wear the clothes, the colorful clothes of African people with the many colors and so on. And we want you to wear these drab clothes that the Arabs wear. And if you don't do that, we'll kill you. This is the kind of thing. And people don't know this. Ordinary people don't understand that it's a cultural war. It's a war against Africa, against African people, against Black people. That's what the war is against. And so in Sudan and in Mauritania, you have right now that struggle. And we have to keep this struggle in front of the world. I mean, the situation certainly, I mean, I always tell people Judaism is an ancient religion, and it's with many beautiful passages. But Judaism is much older than the state of Israel, you see. The state of Israel is only 75 or 76 years old. But the state of Israel, given the way that it has treated the Palestinian people, is basically like the South African white people were treating African people. It's an apartheid system. They don't have the equal rights in Israel. The Palestinians who live in Israel don't have the same rights as Jews. So people talk about a two-state solution in that region of the world. And I say, well, a two-state solution may be the most practical thing. But if Israel, under the political system, is not willing to have a two-state situation where the Palestinians have a state and they have a state, then there's a more radical proposal, which I'm sure they don't want. And that more radical proposal to me would be, why not have an authentic, genuine democratic state, just one state based on democracy, where you have a state based on democracy and everybody votes and everybody has an equal vote. And the people who win, they win because they have most votes. If you had a state like that, which is not a theocracy, not based on a religion, you see, then you would have a true democracy. Sometimes people tell me, well, Israel is a democracy. No, it's not a democracy. It's a theocracy. You have to be Jewish to get the real benefits of that religion. You have to, it's a religious kind of situation. And that's not correct. And that's not even correct if you, in a country like Saudi Arabia, where you have to be Muslim to get the benefits of the government. That's not right either. Or if you were in, if India becomes a Hindu nation, and the Muslim minority in India is really outside of the power in India, and you got a Hindu nation, you still have what I call a theocracy, a nation that's based on religion. If you base nations on religion, you can't call them democracies. And if you want a democratic Israel, then you have to allow the non-Jews to have the same rights as the Jewish people do. So, and this is, and I think people should be clear, at least African American people should be clear, that this is not anti-Semitic. There's no, people say, well, you're not anti-Jewish people. What people are talking about and what the young people are demonstrating for right now on college campuses, they're demonstrating for justice. They're demonstrating against oppression. They're demonstrating against the policies of the Netanyahu government of Israel. I mean, perhaps when Netanyahu is no longer the leader of Israel, there would be somebody who would be much more liberal and progressive and open and democratic in attitude, you see. But right now, we have to be clear as African people and as Afrocentrists, we have to always take the position that all oppression is wrong. Any oppression, you oppress people for any reason, whether it is class, gender, race, color, whatever, religion, whatever, is wrong. That cannot exist. And I'm against all forms of oppression. Afrocentricity has always stated that. That's our position. And so what's going on in the African world is of use and value to us, because in this country, what is going on is a reflection often is what has gone on the African continent.
Wow,
Dr. Asante, you talked about forces that may be aligned with folks who were lined up with Gaddafi. And I'm just curious, just based on the narrative that we get about Gaddafi and his idea of unifying African states and changing the currency to support perhaps a gold-backed currency. What is the relationship between those who were associated with Gaddafi and then and those who are associated with Gaddafi now? Because we've kind of been led to think that Gaddafi was somehow a hero to African people.
Well, I mean, I met Gaddafi, and let me just say this: Gaddafi was a very complex individual, and there are what you have said, Brother Vince, is some ideas are definitely correct. I mean, he was perhaps in his leadership of Libya one of the most progressive leaders during his time in terms of Pan-Africanism. But the question becomes, in terms of Gaddafi, whether or not Gaddafi was truly in charge of the intellectual and the political elements that were trying to promote Arab supremacy over the rest of Africa. You see, because the words that I heard Gaddafi twice in Africa, and Gaddafi sounded good, and there were things that he did that were extremely valuable, particularly in Senegal. He underwrote many of the projects in that country, in that government, because Libya had so much money. A country that only had 2 million people, but yet it had some of the largest surpluses in its oil sector. So they were able to give money to different African nations, and they helped them and so forth. But he was also able to support military adventures in different countries. But when he died and he was killed by the Americans, then what happened was that many of those forces, those military forces that had been set in place by him, became what I would consider be rogue armies. And those rogue armies filtered into Mali, particularly in Burkina Faso, claiming that the people in Mali and the people in Burkina Faso who were Muslims were not good Muslims. They were not the Muslims that the people in the north wanted them to be. So this was a struggle, and this is why people say that Muslims have killed more Muslims than anybody else, because what they basically have said is that our form of Islam is better than your form of Islam. So we're going to come into Timbuktu and we're going to smash the historical museums and the legacies. We're going to burn the books. We're going to do all kinds of stuff to clean out the Islam that you Black people are practicing and bring you a stricter form of Islam. So I wouldn't put all of that on Gaddafi, but I would say that Gaddafi was himself very complicated and complex. But what I have written and spoken about him, and I've spoken, I think it's on YouTube, I've spoken strongly about in support of Gaddafi when he was alive, because I heard Gaddafi speak, and I read the Black Book, the Green Book that he had written. And one of the things he said was that the future is Africa. And not only is the future Africa, but that Africa has everything it needs. It has all the resources. It has all the possibilities of networks and interconnections between different African states. It can support itself. but it needs certain things in a Pan-African sense. And he helped to build those things. If we now look and talk about the African Union, that's because of the influence of Gaddafi. Before that, we had the Organization of African Unity, which had run its course, basically, and was a weak organization. He created the African Union to do one thing, and that was to bring African nations under one government so you would have one Africa. It would be called the United States of Africa. And that was the aim. And I was a part of a meeting in 2004, 2005. I can't remember the exact year right now, but I've written about it. In which there was a subcommittee of the African Union meeting in Abuja, Nigeria, in which 7 presidents of Africa met. And I was happened to be fortunate to be one of the, I was the only person outside of African continent there, but I was one of the few intellectuals that they asked to speak at this conference. And I spoke at this conference about the unity of Africa, because this subcommittee was supposed to organize when would we have the United States of Africa. The African Union had asked these presidents to do this, and so they met, and they had a good 2-day conference, but in the end, some of them decided that they couldn't do it, that it was not possible to do it at that time, that it had to be done, but they were not willing to do it. And the only president at that time who said he could do it and would be willing to do it, spoke with clarity, was President Wade, Abdoulaye Wade, who's the president of Senegal, because he said, if it means that I would only be a governor of Senegal, I would gladly be a governor tomorrow if we could bring about African unity today. He said, I don't have a role, I don't have a problem being a governor. But then, of course, the bigger nations, I mean, my friend Thabo Mbeki just spoke out and said, well, South Africa, we haven't had our independence long enough to want now to give up our sovereignty and be a part of this situation. The president of Ethiopia at the time said no. He said Ethiopia is an ancient government and civilization, and we go back thousands of years. We don't want to join the United States of Africa and lose our identity. So you have these factions and these frictions. There were other people who took other positions, but in the end, they decided they couldn't do it, but they decided it had to be done. So Gaddafi was clearly one of the motivators for trying to get these things done. And ultimately, I think it will happen. We will have a United States of Africa. That will definitely have to happen, because if we do not have a United States of Africa, there are at least 14 countries that should not even exist as countries, because they're unable to sustain themselves independent of other nations.
Right. That's interesting. When you spoke about, the whole Islamic movement, that seems like business as usual, because a lot of folks don't understand that how Islam invaded Africa from the past. So it looked like we're talking about a resurgence, because you're dealing with the African people, and you see, and I agree with you about this cultural situation, because we're going to take anything that we get and put our flavor on it. So I guess that's some of the things that we're looking at right now when you talk about these two fashions of Islam battling. But to me, it just seems like there was something that's been a part of the past of Christianity and Islam coming into Africa and doing what they do. But what I want to.
No, Brother Lynn, I just want to say you are very correct. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, people don't realize that, Ali Masroy, one of the writers and the filmmaker, once made a statement that said Africa had 3 heritages. And I always told him, I said, no, Africa has 1 heritage, but it has 2 invasions. And the first invasion that we can think about in a contemporary sense was in the 7th century, when Islam under the Arabs invaded Egypt. That's the first invasion. And that invasion led to the enslavement of millions of Africans, taking Africans to places as far away as Iraq and Syria, many different, Saudi Arabia. Well, Saudi Arabia didn't exist then, but Arabia, India, many places. The first revolt against slavery on the part of Africans was in Baghdad in the 9th century, and the African revolt in Baghdad led to what was called the Zanj Rebellion. Zanj, Z-A-N-J, and that's where we get sometimes the name Azania from for South Africa. People speak of Azania is because the East Africans who had been enslaved in Baghdad in Iraq revolted and won their freedom in the 9th century. So look, people can go look up the Zanj Rebellion. You'll be surprised. That's the first time that Black people revolted against Islam, and that was them. And then, of course, then you get the Christian invasions, of course, and the Christian coming in and doing some of the same things. So you have these two invasions of the African indigenous culture. And African culture has always been an accepting culture. You know, we open our arms to you, come and eat with us. We greet you in hospitality, that kind of thing. And when people have bad intentions, they take your kindness for weakness. And that's what has happened. And that's why Africa has had all these struggles of trying to say, well, yeah, you know, fine, we don't mind, we don't even mind your religion. But you can't tell me to change my name from Tugu to Muhammad. You know, you can't tell me to change my name from Tugu to Arthur. I'm not going to allow you to do that. Because I have a culture, and my ancestral intelligence, my AI, my ancestral intelligence tells me that Africa, of course, has a much longer history in terms of its indigeneity, as far as its sense of human dignity, than any culture on the face of the earth. In fact, all human beings come from one African woman who lived on the African continent about 300,000 years ago. Everybody got her DNA in us. So that's why it's only one race, and that's humanity. Homo sapiens is the only race.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490 WERE. Our guest is Dr. Molefi K. Asante, and we're having a rich conversation about things that are going on the continent of Africa right now, and the juxtaposition with those of us who are on the other side of the world in America. Brother Antonio?
Yeah, Doc, that's very interesting. And I could see them really getting threatened, because you can see more and more on the internet where you're having these young Africans, you know, and really looking at that their traditional spirituality and past, and seeing that how these two invasions that you talked about really hasn't benefited the country, you know, hasn't benefited the country at all. And I believe through information, empowerment, and the internet, and people speaking up like Joshua Mpunga, Malani, and Dr. Aquino, and Lumbumba. These people are getting the word out and letting these young folks understand that this rich tradition that they had and the way of governing themselves, and I think that's the bridge that has to be crossed, I guess, in order for the continent to flourish with the potential that it has to flourish, is that they need to know who they are. Because what reason would your invaders teach you about your history and let you know about the greatness that you are? And I think that's the threat that that the Islamic base is seeing, because people are returning. They're returning back to who they once were in their greatness. And in all fairness, and I tend to jump on the African American population all the time, though, and I find it strange with this potential of the visa situation, what's going on with the 3 countries, and then Senegal. You're not getting much play in mainstream media here in America. And maybe it may wake up some of my good brothers and sisters over here if they was getting a constant media stream, and understanding what was going on. Your take on that, Don?
Well, I thank you so much for that. Here's the thing. We have to do this probably ourselves. And that's why really 360 is extremely important. And so is the Molefi Kete Asante Institute Lectures series, which is on YouTube. That we have to do this through social media, perhaps not through the mainstream media, because the mainstream media has different interests, and their fundamental interest is profit. So our interest is information and it's knowledge. And that's why you are citing the young brothers from the continent who are doing great jobs speaking and talking. And let me just say this, that they have been influenced deeply by what African American scholars have done. They're influenced by the Afrocentrics, but the Afrocentrics have also been influenced by them. So there is a give and take now that's going on social media and going on internationally and every day by people repeating information that those who got the information first or studied it or have been spreading it, and now it's become popular culture. It's like Sheikh Anta Diop. Sheikh Anta Diop, who wrote The African Origin of Civilization. He's been dead since 1986. But even in his death now, he is more popular than he was when he was alive. That's because people have read him and other people have reported his research, and now it's spreading to all corners of the world because people are saying, Diop was correct, that the origin of civilization is African. And not only that, but all people on the earth were Black before 70,000 years ago, because the migration out of Africa did not happen until 70,000 years ago. And that migration meant that Homo sapiens then went into different parts of the world, into all the other continents. But the first continent where you had Homo sapiens staying for at least 230 or 40,000 years was Africa. We didn't move. Everybody in the world was Black. There was no migrations that happened out of the continent, you see, until 70,000 years ago. So once that information, scientific information, is available to the masses, then you have people like PLO, Lumumba, and Malema, and other people who are out there who are spreading the information on the African continent, while many of us have been spreading it in America and South America as well. South America is booming right now with Afrocentric thinking. They've just, for example, translated my book, The History of Africa, has just been translated into Portuguese by Brazilians. So it is now available to them. They have a new source of information and facts that now the brothers and sisters in Brazil can spread the information about African origin and about what's going on in Africa, America, you see. And this is the kind of thing that is very, very useful and very, very possible for us. So we've just got to keep going and doing that. All right.
Yeah, I think they're gonna lose their mind because by default, most African Americans have given Europe to our white brothers and sisters as being the origin. We tend to look at Africa and South America and the Caribbeans as, you know, places where we set up and spread its civilization. Now the new data is coming out about our presence in Europe, I think they're gonna crush these folks. They're gonna lose their mind and say, y'all trying to take Europe too.
Well, Europe was already taken by Homo sapiens from Africa. In fact, the truth matter is that there are white people who don't realize that they have African DNA, that their DNA comes from the African woman who lived 300,000 years ago. So once they know that, then of course they will realize that they are part of humanity. They are part of humanity that actually after the migration, their phenotypes were changed, the texture of their hair, the color of their eyes because of climate and all of that. And then they woke up one day and thought that they were better than the people from whom they had come. So out of whom they had come. So this is their problem. They have a real psychological issue there. That's the issue. Racism, particularly the notion of white supremacy, is a very dangerous disease. I mean, it's really crazy when you think about it. I mean, how can you believe that you are better than any other human being? We all Homo sapiens, and if anything, they ought to give great praise to their African mothers.
Yes. Well, when it comes to the idea of civilization, it was actually Africans who brought civilization into existence. I think some Europeans have a really short-term memory about that issue. Dr. Asante, I want to shift gears a little bit and just talk about the space for Africana studies, Pan-Africanism in colleges and universities across the country. I know here in Ohio, there's tremendous pushback on the existence of those programs in our universities, and seeing how Afrocentricity and Pan-Africanism is very dear to you. I wonder what your thoughts are about the effort in the American educational system to kind of erase or push back Pan-African thought and education.
Well, to me, the mega Republicans are everywhere. They're not just in the streets. And they're not just in residential areas of towns and cities. Actually, they're on university campuses, and we certainly have confronted that at Temple University, where there is a pushback against African studies and Africology. There's an attempt, I believe, this is my belief, there's an attempt to dismantle the Afrocentric nature of the department that we built over the last 40 years at Temple. And Temple has, of course, produced more PhDs than most of the programs combined. We have over 200 people who have doctorate degrees from an Afrocentric program. And they're everywhere. They're going everywhere and doing everything. So the pushback to that has been severe, particularly the last 2 years at Temple. We have half of the Black faculty men, half of the men in the faculty in our department have been under threat of losing their job insecurity over the last 2 years. We've lost one person who was basically let go. And then we have 3 people who are under threat this year. And we've been speaking out against it. I've been fighting against it. I intend to fight vigorously against it. These brothers have done well. But the European Academy, the American Academy is the same. They know how to move the goalposts when it comes to Black people, particularly getting promoted or getting merits or whatever. Racism, it works in strange ways. They know how to say, okay, you can be promoted, but you need to have a book in a university press. It can't just be third world press. It has to be university press, you see? So then if the brother gets a book that is published by a university press, they say, well, that particular press is not considered a strong university press. You got to get the University of Chicago press, or New York, Columbia University press. You can't do the University of Mississippi. And this is stupid kind of stuff that they do. Those are the games they play with Black faculty members. And this is the game they're playing at Temple. And so we're pushing back on it. But then sometimes they find inside our departments, they find Black people who will collaborate with those who are pushing against our interests. And that's what they found. One person who has been saying, no, we need to get rid of this person. We need to get rid of that one. We need to get rid of that one. If they got rid of 3 of our faculty members, that would be 4 people that they would have gotten rid of in 2 years. This is essentially a dismantling of the Africology department at Temple University. So we're hoping that we can stem this tide. We got the community backing. People are supporting us. They know. They realize that my books were banned by the governor of Florida in Florida, and they know that the development that we have had in African American studies, Africana studies, Africology, as I called it, in the discipline of Africology, which is the Afrocentric study of African phenomena. This notion of the Afrocentric study of African phenomena has been pushed, and it is a discipline. And so people are now reacting to it. But I think that in the end, we will win. We have to.
Yeah, because I think what is important for us to understand, I mean, in this country, that, you know, and you can see it around the world, that this is an attack on African spirituality and consciousness across the globe. You know, we having this resurgence of our consciousness, of coming back into ourselves. And I think, just like we talked about the Muslim world having an issue with Africans going back to their traditional culture and incorporating their traditional culture, they over here in this country, you know, along with the demographic situation that we were about to see that happen, you know, they're trying to put a stop to this.
Yes.
You know, they have to put a stop to that, and we have to understand that we are under attack for this thing, because I call it like, this is like Custer's last stands to them.
Yeah.
If they don't, you know, as eloquently as I've mentioned it before, as Dr. David Quire Whitaker said, for democracy to work, you have to be in the majority. Mm-hmm. And they see that slipping away. Yeah. So now they're receptive to dictatorship, because in a minority position, they can still be in charge. Yeah. With all the federal judges and putting the Supreme Court in play. All those things are chess moves for them to stay in power. So they beat you down, like wrap you up politically like that, and at the same time culturally, and eliminate the information, so your children don't even know who they are or what you're about. Disconnect you from Africa, and we're Aboriginals, we was here, and we don't necessarily let to be out. So all those things are a game and a play, I think, for them to remain in control, because they're under threat, and we need to understand that it's a war going on.
I think you have really hit another very powerful point. This is why there's such a strong anti-immigration stance in the United States. The United States is a nation that was based on immigration, and before 1890, there was no restriction at all on people coming to the United States, and that's why all the Europeans were able to come. The Irish, the Italians, all these people. People say, well, they came in the right way. Well, the right way was you just get on a boat and come to the United States. You're in, and they all came. Big Jewish population, big population of Russians, Portuguese, Everybody came. They were coming. And then you are perfectly right. What has happened now is that the demographics have changed, and they're seeing the demographics change. If I told you earlier, if you got a population, an African population with a low median age of 19 or 17, and then you got Europeans with 49 median age, you now have an older population, but you got all these young people coming, and they're coming not just from Africa and South America, but they're coming even from China now. They're coming across the border. What does that mean? That means that this country will not historically be a majority white country. It's going to be a country that's going to be a multicultural country. And it's going to be many different ethnic groups in this country that are not European. Before, they had a balance because they basically allowed many European groups to come in, but they didn't allow others. And now what's happening is that they're putting rules to keep people from coming in, and they are then trying to convince Black people. And this is what the Trump campaign has done, trying to convince Black people that you got to be against these people who are immigrants because they're coming to take your jobs. They're not taking your job. They're doing the jobs that Black people no longer want to do. And they're doing jobs that will, they're trying to actually build their base for their children and their population. They're hardworking people. All immigrants have always been hardworking people because they come and they say, you know what? I don't have a stake in this society, but I need to prepare myself. So I'm when I see somebody who's walked 1,000 miles or 1,500 miles to get to a place, and they still have their dignity and they're still strong and still willing, those are the kind of people I want to work with me, because I know that those people will do everything to succeed. That is what I want to see. That success on their part, that desire for achievement, that desire for excellence and perfection and strength of will, that's what is necessary to keep even the society going. And I think that that's happening in this society as well.
Wow.
I really want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to say all these things, because I have a great sense that the future is brighter than the past has been. But I do see that there's a cycle, and I see now we're coming back to this sense of cultural grounding, and is developing, that we are having people now who are willing to speak truth to power and to those who don't have power, to let people know that this is the way we can change our possibilities. And if we change our possibilities, we would change also the equation for power. And that's extremely important role that we have to play. And Black Studies has played its role, and it still has a role to play. And I intend to be a part of pushing it. And I certainly intend to push back on white supremacist attitudes at Temple University. That's my goal. We have a young brother, the rapping professor, that is under attack now at Temple University. This brother Aaron Smith, is brilliant and has 2 books accepted by university presses, and yet they want to try to move the goalposts on him and say, well, you need an article here, an article there, whatever. But we're fighting it. So we think that we can win this battle. We should, because he's a brilliant professor, has the largest classes at Temple University. Students just flock to his classes because he's such a good lecturer, but they're trying to shut him down in every way they can. And the department and the students and the community, we're all for him and we all support him.
Dr. Asante, we just have a few moments before we conclude the broadcast, but I would be remiss if I didn't give you an opportunity to tell folks how they can get to your books. I'm going to place a link to the website in the description on our YouTube video, but if you want, could you share with them the information that you'd like to have them have so that they can connect with your books?
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, my books can be had from the website, but you can also get my books, many of them from the Universal Right publication. My latest book with Universal Right publication is called Being Human Being, Transforming the Race Discourse. And that book is written with Dr. Na Dove. So I really look forward to people getting that. And all the others are online. You just put my name, Molefi Kete Asante, and just put books. And Google will give you a place where you can get them if you cannot do my website. And my website comes up as Squarespace, but if you just put my name, molefiketeasante.com, you will get to that as well. And you will be able to have my books.
Okay.
I can be reached always at Temple University by email, masante@temple.edu.
Okay. Well, Dr. Asante, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. We know it's valuable. You have so much knowledge in that head of yours that needs to be disseminated to the universe to keep the tradition of African existence alive. Thank you for joining us on 360 Info Network.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, my brother. All right.
All right. Brother Antonio, we have just a few moments before we conclude the broadcast. Anything you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, just again, I try to bring on, people that kind of keep pushing the envelope of our need to be paying attention and aware of, what's going on around the globe, because, we have to find it strange, just like they did the COVID situation. We find it strange that you're not getting all the information. Go to Dr. John Campbell and you'll get an update on that particular situation. So we got to spread our tentacles broadly as far as information is concerned. So,
all right. Very well said. And to those of you who are listening, we'd like to also big up our engineer, Tone Harley, my man. You make it happen for us every week, and we appreciate you. We appreciate you for listening. So, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. Make today your absolute best day. Peace.
Peace.